We want to remind our listeners that this program is for informational and educational purposes only and not intended to substitute for professional veterinary medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The Animal Medical Center does not recommend or endorse any products or services advertised by Sirius XM.
Welcome to Ask the Vet with Dr. Ann Hohenhaus. This is the place to talk about your pets and get advice with a top veterinarian from the Animal Medical Center in NYC. Hear from the leading authorities on animals and ask your questions. Now, here's your host, Dr. Ann Hohenhaus.
Well, hello. So glad you're joining me here today on Ask the Vet podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ann Hohenhaus. I work at the Schwarzman Animal Medical Center here in New York City, which is where I'm recording from today. I'm a senior veterinarian here and also the director of pet health information. We've got a great podcast for you today. I'll be talking with Sarah Elizabeth Byosiere, the director of the Thinking Dog Center at New York City's Hunter College. And I'm going to talk about research into the study of behavior and cognition of domestic dogs. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation and hope you'll stay tuned. Many of my long-term listeners know about AMC's partnership with Sirius XM, and it's because of that relationship that Ask the Vet podcast is available on all major platforms and also on the Sirius app for Sirius subscribers. We hope you'll like and follow us to stay current on pet health news. The Schwarzman Animal Medical Center is the world's largest not-for-profit animal hospital here in the heart of New York City, also with New York City's only level 1 trauma center for dogs and cats. Now, later on in the show, I'm going to answer questions about pet health. If you have a question about your pet's health, then you can email me and I'll answer your questions on next month's Ask the Vet program. I'm going to give the email address now, but if you don't have a pen or pencil, I'll give it again later in the show after a break so you can write it down. The email address is easy. askthevet@amcny.org. Again, askthevet@amcny.org. And now it's time for our trending animal of the month.
It's time for the internet's most talked about animal.
Murphy is a stunning 31-year-old bald eagle, and he's a resident at the World Bird Sanctuary in Valley Park, Michigan. Unfortunately, Murphy's a permanent resident of the sanctuary because he can't fly due to a permanent wing injury. Recently, his caretakers noticed that Murphy's parental instincts had kicked into high gear, and they noticed he created a nest on the ground and was very skillfully incubating a rock. They didn't have the heart to let Murphy know it wasn't an egg. Apparently, this type of behavior, even among male bald eagles, is a hormonal response to spring. Murphy grew fiercely committed to his rock, and eventually he and the rock had to have their own private enclosure because Murphy became aggressive towards his bunkmate eagles. So as you can imagine, posting this on social media, that social media platform blew up, drawing coverage from across the globe. During this time, an injured baby bald eagle arrived at the sanctuary after its nest fell from its tree in the storm. And the little guy was in need of a foster parent. So the caregivers for Murphy said, let's give him a try at being a parent. And under supervision, they introduced Murphy to the baby eagle. Pretty soon, Murphy was in full father mode, successfully feeding the eaglet. That was the turning point for them to pull back and let Murphy take over the care of the little guy. You can read more about Murphy's adventures and see the amazing photos of the eagle and his foster baby by Googling Murphy the bald eagle. It's such a great story. I'm delighted today to welcome Dr. Sarah Elizabeth Byosiere to Ask the Vet podcast. Dr. Byosiere is an assistant professor and director of the Thinking Dog Center at CUNY's Hunter College. And for those of you who aren't familiar, Hunter College is AMC's neighbor on Lexington Avenue. I can walk there in just a couple of minutes. She's also a certified applied animal behaviorist and has worked at various canine cognition and behavior research groups, including the Anthropology Research Group, the Duke Canine Cognition Center, the Clever Dog Lab, and the Wolf Science Center. The goal of Dr. Byosiere's research is to bridge the gap between theory and practice by developing research questions that have practical implications for individuals, pets, and their guardians, that also inform the theoretical understanding of dog behavior, cognition, and the human-animal bond. Dr. Byosiere has published her research in peer-reviewed scientific journals, presented research findings at conferences, and has been featured on NPR's Science Friday, one of my favorite things. Getting Curious About with Jonathan Van Ness, Gizmodo, Wired Currents, and the Curiosity Stream. Dr. Byosiere, I'm so happy that you could come here to be with us on Ask the Vet, because clearly from that introduction, you're a busy lady.
Thank you for having me.
So before we talk about dogs, do you have any comments about the eagle behavior?
It's amazing. It's so cool. I have to check this out.
Yeah, the fuzzy little eagle, they showed pictures of him, the baby, and his crop is just stuffed with food. I think that it's amazing to me that a 31-year-old eagle actually knew what he should do.
Yeah, this is incredible. I'm curious. I want to go see what they've named the little eaglet. I want to see his fuzzy little face, everything under the sun.
So I can tell you about the name. He doesn't have one.
Oh,
because, well, it's not policy to name eagles that will be released into the wild.
Oh, that's excellent.
So this eagle they're hoping he's normal. His nest just fell out of the tree. And so they're hoping to release the little guy, which is why it's good that he has an eagle feeding him, not a human feeding him. And that if you watch eagle nests like I do, eagles will be like DC9. That will be the 9th baby eagle in the DC nest, because they don't name them. Now, sometimes people will name, the people who follow the nest will name them, but in general, they name them DC9, DC10, something like that, because they'll be released into the wild.
See, I learned something new today.
Yeah, the eagle nests are great, but right now I'm watching a red hawk nest.
Ooh,
I think
they're all over this. Yeah, they're all over this area.
This red hawk nest is in Ithaca, but the peregrine falcon, I think downtown, a chick hatched yesterday.
Oh my gosh, it's springtime for sure, isn't it?
It is, and I don't want the listeners to think that I'm not taking care of their pets, but I am. But I can keep. I have 2 computers, and I can keep one on the nests that I'm watching.
All right, you're paying attention.
So we have to. Now we're going to talk about dogs. So your Zoom picture, has you and a dog. What kind of dog is it? I couldn't tell from the teeny picture.
That is my black Labrador Sadie.
And have you always had Labradors?
I originally, it's funny. My first dog was a black Labrador, and I during the pandemic raised a puppy for a guide dog organization, which was Sadie. And when I had the option of picking whether or not it was going to be a female, a golden retriever, a Labrador, I said, I'd like a black Labrador female, please. And that is reminiscent of my childhood dog, Lindsay.
And so is Sadie still being puppy raised, or she's gone back to the puppy people?
She went back to her organization last year, and after about 6 months of hard guide dog work, turns out that she just loves eating things off the ground way too much, and is not a great candidate for someone who's visually impaired. So she has made a return to us and is now very welcome to sleep on the bed and on the couch, things that she wasn't really allowed to do before.
Well, the whole seeing eye dog situation is really interesting, because I noticed that you didn't say she failed as a guide dog. And I think that's really important that you didn't say that, because it's a job. And like, I would not be good at your job. Maybe you'd be good at my job. But
I don't think so.
But she's just, that's not the right job for her.
Exactly. I think that's a really important thing to emphasize. And I will say that I joke about it. I will, tell her that, she didn't quite make it. And we act silly about it. But just because she was not successful in her career as a guide dog does not mean that she doesn't currently have a job, nor does it mean that she is not suitable for a different job. And so now she gets to come to work with me and gets to help train students on how to conduct research. And she has a very important job. It's not the one she was set out to do.
Well, there's lots of people that make career shifts,
Mhm.
right? So she just had your basic career shift.
Yeah.
So dogs have always been part of your life.
Yes, they have. I always wanted a dog. My parents were not too keen at the start. I think they saw it more as they would be providing the care of the animal. And I really, no matter how many times I said, yes, I'll walk the dog, I don't think they believed me, even though I begged and I tried and I pleaded. And then ultimately, I think when I was early teens, I was able to get Lindsay, our Black Labrador, who we love to pieces.
So is that why? I mean, how do you get to dog cognition? That to me is just, there are many people with dogs. There are not that many people that do dog cognition.
Yeah, this is a great question. And it's one that I don't think I would have ever known until I got, to college. And the reason is that at the career fairs that we have in middle school and in high school, you get to see the standard policeman, the fireman, the veterinarian. But we don't always see that there is an entire world of other industries out there that students can get involved with and can develop career paths within. And so when I went to college, I debated going to an agricultural school or going to, my parents' alma mater. And ultimately, I went with the alma mater because I thought, I needed to follow the lines and in the footsteps of my parents. And then I went, oh no, I want to study animals. I've made the worst mistake ever. I should have gone to vet school. And that's where I discovered an entire world of researchers that study animal behavior rather than studying, for example, animal health.
So how long have you been at Hunter College?
I've been at Hunter College since 2018.
And is that when the dog cognition project there started, or has it been going before you got there?
It's that's a very good question. It sort of started a bit before I got there, and that was because there was a student interest within the animal behavior and conservation program to do dog research. And at the time, they did not have a faculty member who study dogs. And so I was hired essentially because of this interest, the student body that really wanted to get involved in companion animal behavior. So in some ways, some of the students were there before I started, and they really led the way in defining what this program looks like.
So then psychology, where does the psychology in your title fit into this whole dog thing? Do dogs have a psychology, or that seems to be a people thing to me?
Yeah, this is so interesting because most of the time these animal behavior programs that you'll find are in psychology programs. And I think this stems from the fact that a lot of psychology programs focus on what we call comparative cognition. So this idea that you can use animal models to study and compare to human cognition, right? And so I think that's one of the foundational reasons as to why you might see animal behavior programs in psych departments. And historically, this has been attributed to the fact that we started comparing human behavior and cognition to primate behavior and cognition. And this has now since expanded, grown, and developed. But you will also find that there are canine cognition centers and researchers that don't have a background in psychology. They have a background in biological anthropology. They have a background in sociology. Some of them are ecologists. Some of them are biologists. So it's very interdisciplinary.
That really interesting. Now, I remember my sense of time is warped since the pandemic, because every time I say it was 2 years ago, then I say, oh no, it was before the pandemic, which now makes it like 5 years ago. But I remember meeting the guy from Duke. I think his name is Brian Hare,
Mm-hmm.
at an event in New York City. And that was probably easy 10 years ago, and he was speaking at some dog thing that I was at. So where is that back 10 years ago? When did this whole dog cognition interest get started?
Yeah, so it's great that you bring up Brian, because he is sort of one of the founding sort of members of this field. And it's some of his research that really set in motion this boom that we've seen in dog behavior and cognition as an area of study and research in the last 20 years. So Brian's original research looking at how do dogs follow human given pointing signals? So if you point to an object, will a dog go to it? Will they follow your point? This was something that he started looking at in the late 90s. And so the original paper is sort of from 1999, 2000. And at the same time, a research group in Hungary was doing something very similar, finding very similar findings that dogs can actually follow this human given point. And at the time, this was rather remarkable because we had been noticing that when you performed a very similar task with primates, that they did not follow these points. There's a little bit more nuance and ambiguity now that we've kind of explored these options of what's going on. Why do some animals follow a point? In what context do they do this more effectively than others? But it really set off the field of dog cognition. And now it's been, 20, 30 years.
So did we, we've done a lot to make dogs who they are. So the genetic bottleneck in dogs kind of came during Victorian times, meaning Queen Victoria, where a lot of the dogs that we think of as purebred dogs today those dogs were developed about the time of Queen Victoria. And that's when these purebred dogs that we think of today kind of started. So did we select for dogs who we could point to in that whole process?
So this is one of those topics that's really hotly debated, and we don't have an answer. And interestingly enough, there's kind of quite a bit of debate in the dog world when it comes to even the domestication history of the dog. So not even just did we artificially sort of select for these abilities, but also when did domestication happen? How many times did it happen? What was the human involvement in this domestication process? Because we do know that dogs are the first domesticated species. I think most people would actually agree on that. What we don't know is where. We don't know why. We don't know how. And even there's a little bit of debate as to when, because the archaeological timeline does not really overlap with the genetic timeline that we have present. So it is very possible that we have selected for these abilities, right? And that would make a lot of sense. But it may also be bi-directional in the sense that we may not have knowingly selected for these features, and there may have also been a part of the dog's behavior that that played a role in this selection itself. It may have been advantageous for dogs to follow points rather than us selecting for those abilities to follow points.
Yeah, the whole thing is really interesting. And I am in the process of writing a blog, and the opening sentence is, the dog is the first domesticated first species that we domesticated, which actually says a lot about the importance of dogs.
Yes, it certainly does.
Cats are still maybe not that domesticated. I mean, they're sort of domesticated, but not really. They operate on their own terms, is what I would say about cats. I love them, but cats are just definitely not little dogs. So what's going on at Hunter's Animal Behavior and Conservation Program?
Yeah, so we are a master's program. So we take on students who are interested in completing research-based master's degrees, and we focus on exactly the topic of animal behavior and conservation. So we have fantastic faculty that work on various animal species and various topics, such as dolphin behavior, elephant conservation. We're doing more work on urban ecology, cats. We have some fantastic researchers that look at welfare. So we kind of do everything under the sun when it comes to animal behavior, even fish.
So I just recently met a fish veterinarian. I didn't know that there was such a thing as a fish veterinarian. And he was all excited because he'd gotten a new little teeny tiny ultrasound probe for ultrasounding fish. And you learn something every day, but I guess fish have problems too. So I think that's a fascinating aspect of how your and my world intersect. So do you have a fish veterinarian that takes care of the fish do you have fish at Hunter?
I believe there are research labs that do have fish. I think most of the researchers we have actually focus on weakly electric fish from both African and South American populations. Yes, very interesting. And so they, I believe they live on campus, and there's an entire staff dedicated to their care and their behavior and their welfare.
And then there's also I forget what kind of, there's another fish that's very popular in research, but not behavior research, more biological research. And I forget what kind of fish that, it's not a zebra fish. It's like a clear fish almost. You can see its insides through its skin. It's a very cool fish as well.
Yeah, fish are amazing.
Yeah. So what happens, how do you study how dogs think? Since they don't talk, how do you know what they're thinking?
You're exactly right. We can't ask them. We have to figure out through what we can see and how they behave and how they react to kind of get at this little black box, which is what's going on inside of their head, right? So if we're trying to figure out how does a dog perceive a certain scenario? How are they learning about a certain scenario? Can they recall previous information and then apply it to a certain context? We have to design sort of problem-solving studies and experiments in which dogs will participate. And so that means a lot of problem-solving fun games that most of the time involve searching for food or getting some type of reward at the end that we think will tell us a little bit about, do they remember this location of where this snack is now that we've moved it around? Can we train them to tell us which of two circles is larger than the other? And if you give them a new shape, will they then generalize that to this context? So a lot of the times it's coming up with interactive problem-solving games that dogs will willingly participate in.
So can a dog tell a bigger circle from a smaller circle?
They can.
So then if I give them a bigger and smaller triangle, can they tell the difference?
Yeah, they generalize it.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So then what does that tell you about dogs?
Yes. So the original studies that we were doing for this particular design, we were training dogs to tell us which of two circles was larger than the other. And the reason we did this was because there are various geometric visual illusions that humans fall susceptible to, where you are presented, for example, with two circle stimuli in various displays, and one looks larger than the other, even though they are identically sized. And that's just because of the illusion that's, playing with us. And so our question was, do dogs also fall susceptible to these same types of illusions? And if so, can that tell us a little bit about how they visually integrate elements in the world around them? And so that was the first part, was getting them trained to do this size discrimination task, as we call it. And then the next part was to kind of see what would happen if we presented them with equally sized circles in these illusions.
So do you have dogs that live on campus that are participate in these studies? Where do you get the dogs?
And all our dogs are New York City dogs that come in and join us for, usually it's about a 1 hour session, and we're not working for the full 1 hour. Usually our problem solving games are anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes with plenty of breaks. We take about 10 to 15 minutes to hang out with the dog first, get them comfortable to the space. And then the end of the visit is really just playing with your dog and throwing something around, giving them treats. We have a couple of dogs that the first time they come to see us, they're like, what is this place? I'm unfamiliar. And then we use that as just a familiarization visit where we don't do anything. We just do fun things with them. And then they can come back and try our study on a different day when they're more comfortable. And we know, we can express to them that this is a place where they can interact and do what they want. So all New York City tri-state area dogs, and sometimes we do community science. And what that means is that not every dog is an ideal dog to bring into the center space. They may have certain fears that don't really make them comfortable in interacting with us. And so then we have various community science projects that owners can participate in from their own home, and they send us videos.
I think you did one, if I remember correctly, about like some sort of design on a floor that looked like there was a hole in the floor, but there really wasn't a hole in the floor. It was like a piece of paper made to look like a hole.
Yes, we did a rotating snakes illusion. So this is an image that looks like there are various circles that spin around. And so we know that cats will interact with this sort of stimulus. And we wanted to see what would happen if we presented this also to cats, but dogs as well.
And what do the dogs do?
The dogs really didn't do anything, and also that we didn't really confirm the past findings that the cats would interact with this stimulus. So we have a couple of thoughts as to why that is. We presented them on the ground, which had been successful in a study in cats and then also in a study with lions, but we were thinking that potentially we should have maybe put them on more of a vertical plane so that they're looking directly at it rather than having to look down at it.
Ooh. Yeah, the illusion devices, I don't know, the pieces of paper, whatever, they were very cool. They made you kind of dizzy when you looked at
them. Yeah, you can't look too closely, but we did have a couple of cats that pawed at the illusion, which was interesting. And then we did have at least one dog that shredded all the paper. So maybe that was just an enriching activity for that particular pup.
Yeah, we had a dog today who stole a bagel and was very pleased with herself. We could not wrestle the bagel away from her. So there was a study that we read about at the University of California in San Diego, where they're studying the impact of dogs communicating through something called a button map. So I know this is not your study, but what's a button map?
Yeah, so these are you might have seen this around. These are these dogs or cats, and I think there's other animals too, that essentially are pushing these buttons, and they have a human voice that makes an auditory component once they're pushed. So the idea is that you record your voice saying something. When you push the button, that noise comes out of it. And you can present multiple buttons with multiple different sort of vocalizations or words essentially that are associated with those buttons. So the idea is that you could train your companion animal to tap one of those buttons, and then that object, for example, or whatever that button means, might appear.
And so is it a way for a dog? How does a dog know which button to push?
You have to, so this is a great question. You usually start with just one or a handful of them, and you have to sort of emulate what you're doing. So the idea being that you can either get your dog to use their nose or their paw, it depends on what they prefer. Some people tend to put these on walls so that they can nose touch. Some people like to put them on the floor so the dogs can step on them. But the idea is that you kind of do repetitions of this button press and then the object or the circumstance or the consequence that's going to happen. And you sort of show that there's this contingency.
And then are these a research tool, or are people supposed to have them at their house to get their dog to do something?
I believe the original strategy here was a speech pathologist who had used this with clients, human clients, obviously, and had then started to work on this with her dog and thought, oh, this would be a great way for me to better understand what my dog is trying to get, or maybe to understand what my dog wants. So I think both are true. I think we can study it. And I also think that if this is a fun, interactive, and enriching exercise that allows humans to interact with their companion animals, then it's great.
So you were quoted in an interview that you believe dogs have been talking to us the whole time. We just haven't been listening. What do you mean by that comment?
I'm glad you picked that up. I was hoping that somebody might. What I mean by that is that I'm not sure I fully believe that all of a sudden these button pushing dogs are chatting with us. I think we still have a long way to go in terms of the research to really understand what they understand when it comes to these button pushes. But what I was trying to insinuate is that actually dogs are really good at understanding human behavior. Like I said, they follow our human given pointing skills. We know that they can pick up on subtle body and postural changes. If you tense up on the leash when you're walking, your dog can feel that, and sometimes it might change their behavior. And so when we compare that to what humans know about dogs, we are terrible. Not to put us down, but we're not very good at understanding dog body language. When you look at the research, I think there's one study that suggests that we can understand 6 dog barks, and you compare that to some of the gifted word learner dogs like Chaser and Whiskey, who can identify 1,000 human words to find toys. And so in comparison, I find that we are not actually as good as our dogs in communicating with them. And I find that in thinking about these buttons, we're asking them to use human language to communicate with us. So I do think that they've been talking to us all this time. I'm not convinced that we're great listeners.
Yeah, that is, people don't listen to their dogs at all, which is why dogs come to us really sick, because the owners are not paying attention to what the dog's doing. And the other thing is that dogs will show you that they're going to bite you, and people get bitten every day. So we definitely don't listen. So I think that there might be some listeners out in the listening world that would want their dog to participate in your research. Can they do that? And how would they find out about that?
Yes, I would suggest that any listener interested search Dog Cognition Lab on Google. Even if you're not located in the New York City area, there are many dog cognition centers worldwide, and many of us do engage in community science. So if you can't find a lab close to you, odds are you can participate from afar. Other than that, you can also search the Animal Behavior and Conservation Program at Hunter College, and that will take you directly to the research that we do.
What a great opportunity for people with dogs to do something kind of fun and help move science forward. So I want to thank my very special guest, Dr. Sarah Elizabeth Byosiere, for joining me today here on Ask the Vet. And when we come back, if you have a question about your pet's health, just email me and I'll answer on next month's Ask the Vet podcast. Once again, the email address, askthevet@amcny.org. Now we're going to take a short break, but stay tuned because I'll have animal news stories when we return.
We're back with Dr. Ann Hohenhaus on Ask the Vet.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Ask the Vet. It's time for the animal news.
It's time for animal headlines, the biggest animal news from across the world.
First up today are Cinnamon and Felix. Best buds living in North Carolina, but they have a unique friendship. Cinnamon is a goat and Felix is a dog. When their owner could no longer take care of Cinnamon and Felix, they ended up at Wake County Animal Control in North Carolina. And immediately, their new caretakers noticed the incredible bond between the goat and the dog. They were inseparable. And when they were apart, they let the staff know just how unhappy they were. Cinnamon would stop screaming and headbutt the door if we separated them at mealtime, says Dr. Federico, who's the veterinarian at Wake County Animal Control. So the staff started looking for a forever farm that would take the pair so that they wouldn't have to split up the dog and the goat friendship. The Mr. Mo Project found the perfect home for the two best friends. And if you want to see Cinnamon and his dog friend in their new home, just Google goat and a dog friendship for more information and lots of photos. Story number 2 comes from England. In Shropshire, the cat rescue has been taking in homeless, abandoned, and stray kittens and cats since 1989. The shelter was intended to create an area for cats who were too elderly or had chronic issues and pets that needed regular care to live out their days in comfort. But the group didn't stop there. They built Mogi's Retirement Village, a series of mini cottages in a gated community surrounded by green gardens. Today, 18 cats live in the village. Among them, 22-year-old Molly, but also Biscuit, Sky, Jenny, who's 17, Lila Lewis, who's all white with no ears. The volunteers come in to look after the felines every day, and these cats are really lucky because children come and read to them. I'm seeing an opportunity here for our guest today, Dr. Byosiere, to start a thinking cat center, because these cats sound like they'd be perfect to have for studying their behavior and interactions with people. For more information and a special video about these cats, just Google Moggie, M-O-G-G-I-E, Retirement Village for Cats. Now, our next story is about dog nose prints. Turns out that dog noses are just like fingerprints for people. And there is an app that you can load your dog's nose print into, because if your dog ever gets lost, then somebody may be able to find your dog by their nose print. So according to the team at Yonsei University in South Korea, they have developed an AI program that is 99% accurate in identifying a dog by its nose print. And the app is called Pet Now, P-E-T-N-O-W, is available in the United States, Spain, and South Korea. And of course, the advantage of this is that if you find a dog, you have to take it to a vet or a shelter to get that microchip scanner to check the dog for a chip if it doesn't have a collar and an ID tag. But everybody has a cell phone, and so you can use the app to check the dog's nose print to see if the dog is registered, and therefore you can find the lost dog's owner. So if you're interested or you want to record your dog's nose print, remember it's the Pet Now is the name of the app, and you can load your dog into the database so that if it ever gets lost, you're able to find your dog through its nose print. And then our last tidbit of the day, the New York Times recently included this information in their Facts of Interest column. Up to 3.5 billion, that's billion with a B, birds, and more than 600 species migrate across North America each spring, mostly at night. So what does that mean to the listeners? Shut off any unnecessary lights. Yes, it saves energy, but more important, it saves birds who may fly into lit windows during this busy migration period. So now next, we're ready for questions from our listeners. And these ones, there are a whole slug of them today. Thanks to everybody who wrote in. Our first question is from Lillian in New York.
She has a 15-year-old Maltese Chin named Twizzler, who happens to be a patient at AMC. Twizzler whimpers and snores at night. Lillian is wondering if this is normal, or would you recommend she be seen by her vet? Her behavior and appetite are normal.
So one thing to consider is that dogs do dream, and the vocalizing could simply be the dog talking in its dream. And you kind of have to watch and see if the dog is maybe paddling its feet or twitching its lips, something that suggests something's going on in its head when it's vocalizing. The other thing to keep in mind is this is a Maltese Chin, so I'm assuming it's half Maltese, half Chin. Chins have little short noses and are also called brachycephalic. And those dogs with the short noses may have brachycephalic airway syndrome. And those dogs tend to have very noisy breathing because their palate is too long and they have these little laryngeal saccules that flap when the dog takes a breath. And then the last possibility is that maybe Twizzler's developing some sort of laryngeal problem. So my assessment is I think Twizzler needs a trip to AMC to have his veterinarian figure out whether or not this is normal or whether Twizzler is developing a medical condition. Thanks so much, and we'll look forward to seeing Twizzler here. Our next question is Carol.
Carol asks, she has a 12-year-old Bichon Frise who is overweight and has a hernia. Her veterinarian wants the dog to lose weight before she will even x-ray her. Carol would like a second opinion. Should she take her pup to a specialist?
Well, I would say it depends on where the hernia is. So the most common hernia that we see is an umbilical hernia, a hernia at the belly button, and a little bit of abdominal fat pooches out. That any veterinarian can fix. But If her Bichon has a diaphragmatic hernia, which means a tear in the dividing muscle between the chest and the abdomen, that's a big deal surgery. Or if the dog has a perineal hernia, a hernia kind of by their fanny, then those are the kinds of surgeries that you want a specialist for. So I don't quite have enough information to answer Carol's question. The other thing, though, that I'm worried about is her veterinarian doesn't want to do surgery because the Bichon is overweight. That sounds like it's a serious overweight problem, because we see lots of overweight dogs and we still would do surgery. So I'm worried that maybe this Bichon is really overweight and that's making it a poor anesthetic risk or compromises the Bichon's breathing. So I think that losing weight sounds like a great idea. And if it's an umbilical hernia, it doesn't need a specialist, but many of the other types of hernias do. So Carol, I hope that that is good information to get you and your pup well. Our next caller is Katrina, who's asking about her dog's diet.
And Katrina wants to know what she should feed her 8-year-old doggy who doesn't have a spleen. Would homemade or freeze-dried food be better, or her regular kibble? Please help.
So having a spleen or not having a spleen doesn't really impact the diet that you eat. Dogs do really well without spleens. People who don't have a spleen have to be very cautious about certain activities and certain medical procedures, but we don't worry about that in dogs. So I'm going to give Katrina my usual list of things that are important in choosing a dog's diet. You want the label to say the food is complete and balanced for your dog's life stage, meaning complete and balanced for a puppy if you have a puppy, or for an adult dog if you have an adult dog. The food has to be easy for you to get, because if it's really hard to get, you're always going to be out of it. And then you'll be feeding stuff your dog should be eating, like your leftover dinner. It also has to be a food the dog likes. It doesn't matter if it's the best food in the whole wide world. If your dog won't eat it, it's not doing your dog any good. Veterinarians are not wild about raw protein sources, i.e. raw meat, raw chicken, raw fish. We like cooked protein sources. You can feed all the raw carrots, vegetables, fruits that you want to your dog, just no raw protein sources. And then the last thing is veterinarians are very concerned these days about diets that are labeled grain-free, or diets that have a lot of peas, lentils, and pulses in them. Those, not every dog has a problem, but those dogs that have problems with those diets seem to have a bad heart problem, and veterinarians don't like dogs who have problems that we could have avoided by feeding them something that has grain in them. So Katrina, I hope that helps you with your 8-year-old dog who's missing a spleen. She'll live a normal life without her spleen, and so don't worry about that. Pick a good diet to feed her. Our next question is from Rachel, who's a professional pet sitter.
Rachel says she sometimes boards guinea pigs housed on fleece bedding. She wants to know what products she should use that are safe to wash guinea pig fleece. Also, aside from regular washing, does fleece need to be disinfected and sanitized in between households?
So I think anytime you're having pets and then mixing them with other pets from other households, you need to sanitize the bedding. But bedding is going to be well sanitized if you put the bedding in wash it in hot water. Use regular old laundry soap is fine. And I would normally double rinse. You know, my washer has a double rinse cycle on it, so that you're sure all that laundry soap gets rinsed and all the hair gets rinsed out of the fleece. But hot water and soap, laundry soap, are really good ways to sanitize and disinfect any bedding from cats, dogs, or in this case, the little guinea pigs. Next, we have Deb, who has a 5-year-old puppy mill survivor dog named Leo, and she adopted him when he was 6 months old.
Yes, Deb asks, here's the problem. Leo does not like kibble. He much prefers people food, and this has become an ongoing issue. I'm constantly trying new kibble and wet food because Leo stops eating it. We've even tried those specialty tailored foods and are now out of options. Can you please give some much needed direction?
So I think that Deb would like to feed Leo kibble, but kibble is not what Leo wants. So this is a really common question. People are like, my dog will eat canned but not dry, or my dog will eat dry but not canned. Those two foods, or those two food formulations, are completely great things to feed your dog. One is not more nutritious than the other. Occasionally there's a dog with a medical condition and dry is better than wet, or vice versa. But for a well animal, it doesn't matter whether you feed dry or wet food. So I think the choice is really up to Leo. If Leo won't eat kibble, then you can't feed Leo kibble, because it sounds like he's going to starve himself to death. And I think that Leo's probably smart and has Deb wrapped around her little finger because he's probably adorable. And he is holding out to eat something that he wants, like people food as opposed to dog food. But people food's not a complete and balanced diet for dogs. So I think that Deb has to do things with canned food, like microwave it so it's a little warmer, mix some nice chicken broth in it to make it tastier, encourage him to eat it, top it with some of those bonita tuna flakes. That often makes a lot of dogs want to eat their food. But I think feeding canned food only is just fine for Leo. So keep at it, Deb. Leo come around. It'll just take a little bit of work on your side. That's all for questions from our listeners today. But I want to ask the listeners a question, and that is, how many of you sleep with your pets? I bet the answer to that question is a lot of you. But it's important to have a safe night's sleep for your furry friend and yourself. So I want to give you some tips that I learned from a recent press interview that I did. First of all, you need to make sure the bed is big enough to accommodate you and your pets, because you're not going to get a good night's sleep if everyone is crowded in there. And maybe your dog would be happier sleeping on a dog or cat bed near yours. We've already talked about keeping bedding clean, and remember that you want to wash your bedding and the dog bed and the cat bed frequently, hot soapy water, just to make sure that there's no germs that are in the bedding that could make you or your pet sleep. Then be sure your pet's up to date on all vaccines and flea and tick prevention, because when your pet jumps in bed at night, if they've got fleas or ticks, those could absolutely hop onto you and make you sick with the diseases that they carry. And then make sure that your pet's well exercised before bedtime, so that your pet sleeps letting you sleep as well. Now, for those people with a new puppy or kitten, I would caution you against co-sleeping with those little teeny critters, because all it's going to take is one rollover before someone gets squashed or a broken leg. And finally, if you're sick or your pet is sick, I advise sleeping solo, because as we know, we can give COVID to our pets. Our pets can potentially pass something back to us. So sick people and pets need their own room. And when we come back from the break, I'll give you news from the Usedan Institute at the Animal Medical Center.
We're back with Dr. Ann Hohenhaus on Ask the Vet.
Welcome back to Ask the Vet. If you haven't checked out AMC's Usedan Institute for Animal Health Education lately, you really should. The Institute's website is chock full of free pet health information from the veterinary experts here at the Schwarzman Animal Medical Center. To find the information, you just need to log on to AMC's website, which is amcny.org, and put Usedan Institute, USDAN, in the search bar. Our next upcoming Usedan event is Heart Disease in Pets as They Age, and that event will be on May 24th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on Zoom. Now, we know that some types of heart disease are present at birth, but most heart conditions in pets develop as they age, and these are called acquired heart diseases. So it's important for pet owners to be able to recognize the signs of heart disease so that they can implement early intervention. This event will feature AMC's cardiologist, Dr. Samantha Kochi, who will discuss the most commonly diagnosed acquired heart diseases in dogs and cats, and she'll talk about their treatments and the long-term prognosis. Like all USDAN events, this event is free, but you have to register so that we can send you the Zoom link. And if you want to register, again, go to amcny.org and put USDAN events, USDAN events in the search bar. I want to thank my very special guest, Dr. Sarah Elizabeth Byosiere, and a very special thanks to everyone who has downloaded the Ask the Vet podcast. We really appreciate your support. I hope you'll email me if you have a question about your pet's health. You can reach me at askthevet@amcny.org, and I'll answer your question on next month's Ask the Vet show. AMC has a very active social media feed, and you can find us on Facebook at The Animal Medical Center, and Twitter and Instagram is AMCNY. Be sure to like and subscribe